A chef with no business degree, no investors, no MBA built one of the most powerful personal brands in the world. And the business strategy he used? Most Fortune 500 companies would never dare try it. What if the most powerful business strategy in the world wasn't taught in any MBA program, wasn't in any investor playbook, and was never recommended by a single business consultant? What if it came from a chef, a man who spent his early career elbow deep in restaurant kitchens, no formal business training, no safety net, and ended up building a brand so powerful that networks, publishers, and investors chased him instead of the other way around? His name was Anthony Bourdain. And before you think this has nothing to do with your business, your investments, or your money, stay with me. Because what he figured out in a kitchen applies directly to every entrepreneur, investor, and business owner watching this right now. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why. Here's the rule that almost every business, every investor, and every brand follows without even questioning it. Do what worked last time. Last quarter's strategy. Last year's product. The campaign that already performed. Play it safe. Repeat the formula. And here's the brutal truth about that approach. It works until it doesn't. Markets shift. Audiences evolve. Competitors catch up. And the businesses that built their entire model around repeating yesterday's success suddenly find themselves completely exposed. Bourdain refused to operate this way, not because he was reckless, but because he understood something most business owners never do. The moment you stop innovating is the moment you start declining. And in today's economy, standing still is the most expensive decision you can make. Now here's something that completely flips conventional business wisdom on its head. And it's the principle that gave Bourdain more leverage than almost anyone in his industry. He didn't need to be on television. He wasn't desperate for the deal. He wasn't afraid of losing the contract. And that single position, genuine indifference to losing, gave him negotiating power that most business owners spend their entire careers trying to manufacture artificially. Think about what this means for your business. The moment a client, a partner, or an investor senses that you need them more than they need you, your leverage collapses. Build your finances, your client base, and your business model in a way that means no single deal can threaten your survival. That's not just good strategy. That's the foundation of real negotiating power. Here's something most high-income earners and business owners get completely backwards. They sacrifice their health, their relationships, their peace of mind, all in the name of building wealth. And then they spend that wealth trying to recover what they gave up. Bourdain was ruthlessly intentional about one thing. He refused to wake up feeling bad about decisions he made the day before. Not for a network, not for a deal, not for money. And here's the business angle that most people miss when you constantly compromise your standards for short-term gain. You slowly erode the judgment, the creativity, and the decision-making quality that made you valuable in the first place. Protecting your quality of life isn't a luxury. For a business owner or investor, it's an asset protection strategy. Here's a mindset shift that separates businesses built on genuine value from businesses built on hype. Bourdain didn't chase outcomes. He was obsessed with the process. The craft of putting a scene together. The technical satisfaction of making something work. The private moment of knowing you executed something well before the world even saw it. And here's why this directly applies to your business and investments. When your decisions are driven purely by the outcome, the profit, the valuation, the exit, you start cutting corners in the process that eventually show up as problems downstream. But when you're obsessed with doing the work well, the outcomes tend to take care of themselves. Great businesses are built in the details that nobody ever sees. Here's a cost that never shows up on any balance sheet, but it might be the most expensive thing in your business. Fear. Bourdain observed that almost everyone in his industry operated from fear, fear of failure, fear of irrelevance, fear of taking a risk that didn't pay off. And because of that fear, they kept doing the same thing, the same way, every single time. Sound familiar? In business, fear of a bad quarter keeps companies from making bold investments. Fear of client pushback keeps owners from raising prices they deserve. Fear of failure keeps investors sitting on cash instead of putting it to work. Fear masquerades as caution, but most of the time, it's simply the most expensive long-term strategy available. Here's where Bourdain's thinking gets genuinely profound and directly relevant to anyone watching a channel about business, tax, and the economy. He observed that food is the most honest economic indicator there is. What people eat, how they eat it, and who gets access to it. All of it is shaped by the economic system around them. And here's the investment angle worth paying attention to. The businesses and economies that create genuine access, genuine value, and genuine inclusion, those are the ones that sustain long-term growth. The ones built on scarcity, gatekeeping, and exclusion tend to collapse under their own weight eventually. Real economic health isn't measured in GDP numbers alone. It's measured in what ordinary people actually have access to. Bourdain understood this sitting across dinner tables in 40 countries before most economists wrote about it. Here's something every investor and business owner in 2026 needs to understand, and Bourdain saw it decades ago, from a dinner table, not a trading floor. The world's economies are completely interdependent. What happens in one country ripples immediately into supply chains, currencies, commodity prices, and consumer behavior everywhere else. He spent years sitting with ordinary people in countries that were supposedly enemies of each other and found the same things everywhere. Similar hopes, similar struggles, similar economic anxieties. And the lesson for investors? Ignorance of global economic interdependence isn't just a philosophical problem. It's a portfolio risk. The businesses and investors who understand how connected the world actually is make better, more resilient long-term decisions than the ones operating with a purely domestic lens. Here's something that most successful business owners and high-income earners quietly lose over time, and it costs them more than they realize: the willingness to be a complete beginner again. Bourdain started jiu-jitsu at 58 years old, walked into a room where he knew nothing, where younger, less experienced people could outperform him entirely, and he found it deeply satisfying. Why does this matter for business? Because the moment you stop being willing to learn, to be wrong, to be the least experienced person in the room, your judgment calcifies. The entrepreneurs who stay genuinely curious, who keep learning new skills, who remain open to being challenged, those are the ones whose businesses keep evolving. Comfort is the enemy of growth, at every income level. So here's what Anthony Bourdain actually teaches us about business, wealth, and success, and none of it requires a kitchen or a TV show. Don't repeat what worked last time just because it's safe. Build financial independence that removes desperation from your negotiations. Protect your standards because your judgment is your most valuable business asset. Obsess over the process, not just the outcome. Understand that fear is a cost, not a strategy. Stay curious about the world's economy because it directly affects your investments and your business, and never stop being willing to be a beginner. These aren't soft life lessons. These are hard, practical business principles from a man who never once called himself a businessman, but outperformed most who did. If this made you think differently, subscribe because this is exactly the kind of thinking we break down every week on this channel.